Welcome to Eye Opener. This Sunday we have a very exciting program, very exciting topic for us to discuss. As you have been following probably on our shows, we will be talking about the calendar that IIT Kharagpur has produced, talking about the Aryan invasion or Aryan settlements as a myth produced by the colonial historians, or so to speak, colonial forces that are trying to divide India and rule. That's the primary agenda that we see in the entire calendar. And today we have a very distinguished professor. In fact, he's a retired head of the department from Madras, has been the president of the 24th session of Tamil Nadu History Congress, and have authored 9 books so far. Professor Karunanandan Garu, welcome sir onto the show.
It is a pleasure to be with you, and it is a very good occasion for me to share my views with a very learned audience.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. And it's a pleasure and honor, and it's a real honor on us a lot to invite you and to have you on our show. The former president of AUT, ACTA, and the member of Syndicate, Madras University. Lots of titles on you, lots of experience that you carry in the academic areas or the academic field that you have served this country so far. And one question to begin with, as an icebreaker probably, in all of your these years of experience, sir, do you approve of, or do you agree with the approach that the IIT Kharagpur has come forward with a calendar talking about issues that are very controversial for some people, but they are very emotional and dear to the hearts of some other people, and more importantly for historians like you, it might be distorting or misrepresenting the facts.
Normally, history is always used by the powers that hold the reins of the government. They try to control history or tamper with the history to serve their own interest. That we understand. India's first history of India, was produced by East India Company in the year 1817. Until then, there is no Indian history and there was no Indian historiography. So William Jones started the Asiatic studies, which paved the way for the ideological researches. At the time, they were served in the government. East India Company is not a regular an administrative agency. It secured the territories here and it was permitted to run the administration. So as a Western country, England felt the need for creating history for the colonies that it created later, so that its administrators will be benefited by that knowledge. So they entrusted the work to Haileybury College. So Haileybury College produced the first history of India, history of British India, in 1817. So we are like 204 years have passed since the first history was published. Until then, we had only some evidences for certain events. Some biographies, autobiography, the processes, so many other things are there. There was no concrete history of a nation. The first history was history of British India in 3 volumes. The first volume, ancient period, which they called Hindu India.
Okay.
The second division, which covered the Islamic period, they called Muslim India, Muhammadan India. Then the third chapter, they called it, very surprisingly, British India. The first 2 were named after religions. The last one, that is modern period, they called it British India. British does not indicate a religion, but a nation and a culture. And how did they create the Indian history then? They were supplied information only by those who were serving them. So all the upper caste people were in the government, the company's government, they produced the evidences for making a history.
Mm.
And mostly they relied on Sanskrit literature
Mm.
because they did not go through any other linguistic sources.
Mm.
They relied only on Sanskrit literature, which served the purpose of a ruling clique or a influential clique in the society. So based on that, they created Hindu India.
Mm.
Unfortunately, that Hindu India at that time, no literature, Sanskrit or any other literature, makes a reference to Hindu. There is no Hindu in any of the Sanskrit literature.
Mm.
Hinduism is not a religion.
Mm.
But anyway,
Mm.
who then created that history? Only the upper caste people who served the government, they supplied the materials and they developed it further. So when Max Muller, he was entrusted with compiling the Sanskrit literature, he was given money for it by the East India Company.
Mm.
How that a German man could know Sanskrit, that language was forbidden for other people in India.
Mm.
This question was raised by E.M.S. Namboodiripad, the Marxist leader, who was twice the Chief Minister of Kerala.
Mm.
So whose interest it was supplied to him? He learned Sanskrit with Brahmins.
Mm.
Only with the Brahmin help, he learned Sanskrit and translated it into other language.
Mm. Mm.
So the theory that Indo-Aryan group of languages, which was evolved during this period, entirely suited the interest of the British rulers and the Brahmin supporters.
Mm.
So it was a joint protection.
Mm.
The theory was a joint protection of the influential segment in India, the colonial masters. They befriended each other
Mm.
and they claimed that they were closer to it. So they were the cousins. They agreed that Sanskrit belonged to the Indo-German family. At that time, it was convenient for the Brahminical interest.
Mm. Mm.
They could claim that they were cousins of the Europeans.
Mm. Mm.
Why Tilak is called a patriot or nationalist by the present day patriots, Balagangadhar Tilak?
Mm.
Why should they write a book when he was in prison on the Arctic home of Vedas?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Was he stupid? Was he senseless? Or was he carried away by the propaganda of the British? He at that time, these influential segments in India were collaborating with the British authorities.
Mhm.
So they evolved a theory that the Aryan languages emanated only from Scandinavian region.
Mm.
They were all the members of the same linguistic family.
Mm.
And they produced umpteen number of literature to support this view.
Mm.
At the time it was convenient. But when the Indus Valley civilization was excavated
Mm.
in the year 1921-22, prior to that, there was no reference to non-Aryan cultures in India.
Mm.
You would have seen, you would have known all the Indian history textbooks, in all which there is the Indian culture civilization were the products of Aryans.
Mm.
So in claiming Aryan authorship for the Indian civilization, they have no objection.
Mm.
Even today, the UGC produced a syllabus for the universities, for the undergraduate courses in history, which claims one whole unit is devoted to Aryan civilization.
Mm.
So Arya, when they use Arya for their self-projection, it is a patriotic expression.
Mm.
When the same Arya was disputed, or when it is stated there are non-Aryans too, when that argument comes, it becomes treason.
Mm.
Because all these arguments were coming from one particular propaganda.
Mm.
That is, they say that the Aryan invasion is a myth.
Mm.
But what they want us to believe is that when the historical conclusions are termed as myths, but they want all the mythologies in Sanskrit to be accepted as historical facts.
Correct.
And they say that these Aryan, non-Aryan arguments were part of the British what you call conspiracy to divide and rule. What we find in history of civilization in the world is that no civilization can emerge in isolation. The development from the animal stage to civilized society comes through responding to the challenges, coming into contact with others, and their preparedness to evolve new methods to overcome the existing challenges. No civilization can be produced by Robinson Crusoe, who was isolated in an island. Civilization comes only when you live with others.
So that's an excellent way of putting it. No civilization can emerge in isolation. That
Yes.
if we take that as the ground reality, if we take that as an agreed, statement, everybody probably might agree with that. If that is the case, why reputed institutions like IIT Kharagpur are if they are bringing a calendar that says that everybody belongs to the same family and we are learning from each other, it's all just one nation, Aryans and Dravidians, and this is all a course or a created myth, stuff like that. If they are trying to produce one identity, will that be a problem to academicians like you?
Definitely, because history is an art of searching the truth that made our progress from the under-civilized to uncivilized stage to a civilized one. So in this, we are all partners in progress. And if anybody says that he is the only person who created everything, because the Kharagpur calendar is a classic example of colorable excess of authority.
Okay.
Because that is a technological university. We can understand, we produce something about the technology that exists in the past. The technological institute is abused to distort existing history. Because authority is abused to project one particular view, because that's also interest of, exploitative interest of some other group. Here, the Kharagpur calendar is not the first instance of abuse of authority.
Okay.
It was preceded by the institution of a committee for the construction of India's cultural history for 12,000 years, which never produced any report. And then it was followed by the national education policy, in which they wanted the students and teachers to agree that India's culture and civilization emanated only from Sanskrit and Sanskrit-based culture.
Right, sir. Before I forget, I'm sorry if I'm asking questions in the middle, but this is a very important question for me and also for the audiences, because there are some comments asking me about these questions when I posted about an interview about you. The national education policy that you just referred to a couple of minutes ago, how is it connected to the authoritarian ideology or the authoritarian ideology that you are talking about? Is it going back to the roots of our own learning system? Will that be a problem to academicians?
Definitely, because you know that education was originally in the state list, and it was transferred to the concurrent list during the emergency. Okay, the fathers of the Indian Constitution acknowledged the fact that in a federal system, the education, health and such other things should be administered only by the state, because which is nearer to the people. And India being a multicultural, multilingual nation, education ought to be exercised by the provincial governments or the state governments. And so far we had 3 education policies: 1968, the first education policy which was produced when Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was the helm of affairs. The second one during the time of Rajiv Gandhi. The third one in 2020, the Bharatiya Janata Party's regime. The first one was published when education was in the state list.
Okay.
These were in the form of recommendations, suggestions.
Recommendations, right.
And the second one, which was enacted after the education was transferred to the concurrent list in the days of Rajiv Gandhi. There too, the recommendation of the Rajiv Gandhi's education policy were not given as orders to the state governments. States were given the option to adopt it, modify it, or reject it. So Tamil Nadu, as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, Tamil Nadu rejected 3-language formula, retained 2-language formula, because this was possible because of the constitutional position of education as a state interest. In the concurrent list too, what is exactly expected? Both governments should concur on a particular issue. Concurrence should precede the decision, conclusion. But here, the union government takes a decision and asks the state government to adopt it. So this third education policy, national education policy, brought out by the Bharatiya Janata Party government, is not in the form of recommendation, but in the form of dictations, which makes the entire education system controlled by the bureaucrats at Delhi.
Right.
There will be a commission for the entire higher education, entire school education. All the state laws will become defunct once this law is accepted. So all the universities forego their right to evolve syllabus. Now the syllabus comes from the UGC.
Right.
UGC is not meant for syllabus making. It has been assigned a different work, coordination, and recommendation, and little financial assistance whenever it is needed. And UGC is never expected to evolve syllabus. Then why these universities should do it?
Right.
There are boards of studies which can do it better.
Right. So with the intellectual program that, intellectually using the universities and the educational institutions trying to push their own agenda, do you sense any particular strategy in this? Do you sense that it is dangerous to the states, or it is really not helpful even to the students as well? Do you see like that? I mean, or you see that it is just another political way of administration?
Education cannot be isolated from the social realities, especially the social sciences. They cannot be segregated from social realities. Education is part of the social requirement. So India is a country of multiple sources, different languages, different cultures, different races. So that identities of the provinces ought to be recognized in history. The contributions from every quarter must be acknowledged in the history syllabus. For example, you are in Andhra Pradesh.
Yes.
Andhra had a glorious past. In the post-Mauryan age, the first South Indian empire was created by the Satavahanas. 2nd century BC to 3rd century AD. Nearly 500 years, that Satavahana empire that was in Deccan, which adopted Prakriti in their inscriptions and governmental orders.
Right.
It never adopted Sanskriti.
Correct.
Only Prakriti.
And
it patronized mostly Buddhist. And you know that most of the Buddhist structures in the Andhra Pradesh,
correct,
they belong Nagarjuna, Gonda, all these things. It belonged to the Satavahana period. Even the Ajanta, Ellora caves, they belong to that particular period. Then later on, it was added by the Rashtrakutas and others. So this history, this Satavahana empire was more larger in extent than the Gupta empire. Gupta empire flourished only for 150 years. The Satavahana empire flourished for 500 years. Satavahanas had overseas contact. They received traders, they sent traders. They had contact with the Roman Empire and the Chinese Empire. And this Satavahana period is not given, it's due in your syllabus.
Yeah, that's
So
hilarious.
that means
That's true. Yeah.
the contributors being sidelined and the exploiters being projected.
Okay.
That cannot be the history. Here, by distorting unnecessarily, bureaucratizing the education, especially history making, the government is trying to project something which was exploitative in its nature as real nation makers. The nation makers were different people. Because you know that the Vedic literature did not see trading activity with a favorable one, because they consider it voyaging across the seas is a sin.
Correct. Yes.
The Pawnees in the Rig Veda, they were traders. They were mentioned as Anaryas, non-Aryans.
Yes.
So trade is a part of civilization development. It spreads culture. It improves culture. The people who scorned trade and abused traders now claim that they were the creators of everything in India.
So you clearly see it as the contributors versus the exploiters.
Yes.
So in this particular context today, in today's scenario, the agenda that whatever ideological forces behind these institutions and pushing this ideology into the Indian fraternity or Indian subcontinent, do you also see the same diversity? Do you also see the same conflict, like contributors versus the exploiters?
Definitely, because you know that in the Marxian theory, classes, the class conflict is the basic thing. The one who exploit the workers, they are being challenged by workers later stage. So the thesis, antithesis and synthesis comes out. The class system changes. The people who belong to one particular class and their inheritors may change to other class later on. The slaves have become masters in Europe. But in India, the social system is different. The conflict between the exploiter and the exploited is continuous. By making the working class and their rights and duties and their facilities, everything birth-based. So the real work, what you call the progressive work or productive work, the work is being suppressed or exploited, and these workers are denied their due throughout the history. There is no class, the Varna change in India.
Right.
Class changes were taking place in North India. So that is why, while evolving a history for India, we should bring out social realities so that we can create a healthy society in future. We want to make the society more cohesive. You cannot build a society more cohesive if inequalities persist, and they were justified and they were sanctified. Here, that is what happening here.
Okay.
The inequalities, the system of inequality is being sanctified as a divinely ordained one.
Correct.
For example, in the Kharagpur calendar, the first 4 objectives they mentioned there, the first page itself, that is recognition of the secret of Vedas, 1. Second, reinterpretation of Indus Valley civilization. The third one, rebuttal to the Aryan invasion myth.
Right.
And fourth one, 12 evidences. There are no evidence at all. Myths are projected as histories. So this is how. So they are very clear that they want to say that everything in India owes to the Aryans. But there is a confusion here too. By Aryan, they don't mean all the Aryan working class. They don't accept Buddhist. They don't accept Logayadas. They don't accept the people who are workers in the Aryan society. It is, in fact, they try to mislead us that Aryans, by Aryans they mean only Brahmins. There are several books produced by the same people who are members here, stating that the Brahmins were the fathers of Tamil civilization. The Brahmins are the fathers of the Bengali civilization, Marathi civilization. It is a caste.
It's really interesting to hear that from you. How would you respond to an argument like that, that Brahmins or Brahminical society is originally fathered Tamil society? How would you take it?
The civilization is the expression of material progress. And the intellectual progress or ethical progress is secondary. Material progress is the basis of the civilizations. Building cities, houses, and all the facilities for the human activity, all these are created in the civilizational activity. Okay. Who will indulge in this productive activity? The pottery is done by potters. The cloths are produced by the weavers. Brick making is the work of the workers. Where does the Brahmin come here? The Brahmin, as per the Smritis, he was not entitled to do manual work. The manual work is done by somebody else. How can he claim that? Who designed that manual work? The Rigvedic Aryans dwelt only in the tents, temporary tents, transitory tents. They were not living in the permanent buildings, in the fort or in the cities. The Rigveda himself says that the fort belonged to the enemies Anaryas. And they were fighting with them in many battles. Their first interest is to destroy their structures.
Right.
And how such people who had a pre-existing excellent civilizational urban culture claim that they were the masters of Shilpa Shastra or Vastu Shastra. Only those people built houses with the bricks will know that particular nuances about building better houses.
Right.
The thing is that they claim authorship for everything. This is the most dubious one. And history cannot be built on the basis of claims. It has to be supported by evidences, proofs. And how civilization was produced by priesthood. Every civilization was produced by workers, working class. That is why we say that they they try to establish that everything is there in Rig Veda.
Right. You very interestingly mentioned about the evidences, not just the claims, which is a very that's the actual point of discussion here. In the calendar for the month of January, February, and March, they focused on some evidences. For example, in January, for the month of January, they talked about horses that you can find in Egypt today, which are in Tibet today, which are more closer to the species or horse species 5,000 years ago, which simply means India already had horses in before the so-called Aryan invasion myth. So that is number one. Number two, they talked about the swastik. Number three, they talked about the Shivalinga and the life that that the cycle of life of the six. So on and so forth. So these evidences, these excavations, evidences from the excavations, how do you see that? Are they really evidences, or that is just a sheer misrepresentation of the original?
It is nothing but misrepresentation. Some of the Indus Valley seals had swastika symbol. The Rig Veda, there is a swastik stamba. That is how they mention it in Rig Veda. What does it mean? They say that this Indus Valley was not pre-Aryan, it was not non-Aryan. Their claim is that it was a part of the Vedic civilization.
Vedic civilization, yeah.
But that Rig Veda had no script at that time. Indus Valley people had a script. The script mostly meant for the trade purposes. That script. And along with that, we find some symbols. Swastik was a symbol. The question is, Rig Veda was compiled as a written text only in the post-Christian era. Sayana, by Sayana.
Right.
It received a script only very late.
Right.
But Indus Valley people had a script. Who are the earliest one?
Right.
The people who produced the script are people who were scriptless for a longer period. The first Sanskrit inscription occurred only in 2nd century AD.
Oh, 2nd century AD.
AD, Girnar inscription. Prior to that, there is no Sanskrit inscription. But when you come to Tamil Nadu, our excavations revealed that we had our own script as early as 6th century, 7th century BC. Which is the earliest one?
Correct.
So if you apply your common sense, you will understand that the Indus Valley people had an art of script writing, and they also had a pictographic representation. Swastika meant the solar power, rotating on solar power. And Rigveda never explained that. Simply there is a mention swastik.
Right.
That may mean anything. And the swastik was a symbol of the Jains. So it is, it is used by several people, but the earliest one occurred only in Indus Valley. Now they say that swastik commenced from Rigveda, so that they want to put Rigveda prior to, that is much older than the Indus Valley civilization.
So you see this as putting the cart ahead of the horse?
Yes, and one more thing, they refers Kailash.
Yeah, Kailasgiri, yes.
Kailash and the rivers emanating from the Kailash.
Right.
Is there a single reference to Kailash in the Rigveda? They mention Himavat, Himalaya. That is the place of snow. They never mentioned the Kailash. There is no Shiva as a god in the Rigveda. The Shivis were a people known for them, a small tribe living there as Shivis. There is no Shiva as a god. The Rigvedic Aryans were not worshipping idols. Rigvedic Aryans scorned those people who worshipped idols. Rigvedic people's activities were centered on yajna,
right,
fire altars. They had no temple, had no what you call the statues or any other idols for them. And they derided people who worshipped the what you call the idols. They described their images as worshipping idols, female goddesses. So their worship system was entirely different.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the excavations in Tamil Nadu area.
Yes.
Are you referring to the Kayadi or Kaladi excavations?
Kidadi, there are several places, not only Kidadi, Purunal, Kidadi. There are nearly about 20 places where the pottery works were discovered.
Are there any evidences? Are there any evidences of Hindutva or Hinduism or the religion promoted by the so-called the Indian knowledge system that IIT Kharagpur is promoting? Any swastika, any Shivalinga, anything that is hijacked by Hindutva?
The early Tamil culture and the Indus Valley culture, there is one common feature which is very astonishing, that people could have some belief in something, that is a different thing.
Right.
But there was no organized religion, there was no big temple. So religion was not the focal point in their cultures.
Okay.
So in the Tamil Nadu excavation, so far we did not discover any such a thing. Indus Valley too, the representation was found only in the seals. There was no structure which can be climbed as a temple. So these priestly activities were totally absent in our culture. The priesthood and priestly activities were the prominent feature of the Aryan culture. So this priesthood, and only the priest could perform the yajnas, was a methodology adopted in the Aryan world, not in the non-Aryan world. In the South Indian belief system, we have celebrations, we have festivals, fairs, where there is no reference to any hereditary priest in any of the literature.
Okay.
People assemble together, celebrate their gods, they have their feast, then go and disperse. That is the only thing. there is no hereditary priesthood in the South Indian system. Hereditary priesthood belongs entirely to the Vedic order. Now, this by distorting history, they want to establish that the hereditary priesthood evolved everything, and it must be retained, it must be justified, it must be glorified. In the syllabus issued by the UGC, they gave a caption, the glory of the Indian literature.
Right.
They include only the Sanskrit Vedas, Smritis, Puranas in that list. Is Sanskrit synonymous with India? So they refuse to believe that there were non-Aryan cultures in India, there were non-Aryan contributors to Indian civilization, where we differ with them. No civilization, nobody can claim divinely ordained right for civilizational activity. There was an age when the Jews called themselves chosen race.
Right.
And this claim was very miserable. And there, those who were chosen race, they could not be saved from eviction from their own motherland. But here, these people say that this Varna, Sanadana, was divinely ordained one. The Vedic system, why they insist on Vedas? The whole graded social order found a place justification only in the Sanskrit literature, especially Smritis, and a veiled reference in the later Vedic literature. So this unjust social order has to be revived in India.
Is that do you think that's the focus, or the ultimate focus is that agenda. Through these calendars?
Yes, that is the agenda. They want to make us believe that our India, their Vedic civilization commenced with perfect knowledge. They knew everything. There was no need for them to learn from others.
Right.
They knew civilization, their existence commences with perfect knowledge, perfect system.
Sir, that statement is really intriguing, really interesting. As you rightly said, the Vedic culture or the Vedic civilization knew everything, or perfect knowledge, Indian knowledge system, as this calendar also promotes. Parallel to them, even some member of parliaments, even the prime ministers, even some chief justices of High Court and Supreme Court, so on and so forth, very influential people in India also have this opinion that there is a lot of scientific evidences in, such as Vimana Shastra, such as Vastu Shastra, such as, the Khagola Shastra or astrology. There are so many sciences in Vedas, and these Westerners looted our Vedas. They took these Vedas away from us, and they learned, and we are behind because we could not learn Vedas. This is the theory that we see in the social re-engineering agenda that that happens these days. What is your opinion about it?
The Greeks had a civilization,
sir,
and even the Greek scholars, Plato and others, Aristotle. Aristotle is known as the father of the sciences. He classified sciences. Even he did not make a claim for physics, chemistry, anything. He simply codified everything and gave it to us. Knowledge widens in gradual stages through gradual experience and explorations and observations. Knowledge does not come through divine will. It comes through human effort. So here they say that Vaimanika Shastra. And Rama had a Pushpaka Vimana to go to Ayodhya after the Lanka war. Then why he should build a Ramasetu to reach Ravana's place for a war?
Right.
You could have used the Air Force at the time. Vaimanika Shastra. Could they produce any text of the Vaimanika Shastra? Second thing, Charaka, Susruda, they knew little surgery. We don't deny that. But they belong to an age which was very much later. Charaka belonged to the Kanishkan age, 2nd century AD, and they included Kautilya, as the father of economics. They say that the father of economics. Definition of economics is entirely different. Arthashastra is meant to suggest ways and means to strengthen the king's authority. It is not about to improve the wealth of the people. Even Adam Smith talked about wealth of the nations. The one which justifies autocracy of a king. How can it be a textbook on economics? That Arthashastra, even according to them, I feel that his age, that he belonged to a Mauryan age itself is a distortion. He belonged to a much later date. Even if you accept he was the minister of Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya lived in the 4th century BC. Would you include 4th century BC in the Vedic age? So the claims are absurd. They listed about 10 Shastras.
Yes.
In the final page, 10 Shastras. In which Kautilya is there, Sanskriti is there.
Yes.
Sanskriti is there. So many other things, Shilpa Shastra, Natya Shastra, everything is there. Bharada's Natya Shastra belonged to a Guptan age. How can you call it a Vedic achievement? So most of the literature pertaining to this were produced at much later time. This could be possible that they were able to learn from others and then put it in writing. Only when Sanskrit came to be written in script.
Which is 2 AD.
This happened much later.
Which is 2nd century AD, as you pointed out.
After 2nd century AD. So they cannot claim anything to it. And even the earliest monuments in India were Buddhist monuments. None of them belong to the Vedic monument. If the Vedic people were much excellent builders, Vedic structure could have been available now. Monuments could have been available now. The earliest monuments available in India belong to Ashokan age. You cannot show a temple which belonged to pre-Ashokan age. So all these claims were bogus claims to mislead the innocent people. But now what they do now is that they want to make it official record. The authority cannot be abused to make falsehood as a real thing. So if you are a genuine, we don't say that other people are perfect. The non-Aryans had their own defects. So no system had perfection in it. They learned their lessons and they improved their conditions.
Right.
So here this Hindutva claim is there. They commenced as a perfect order. The perfect order would continue if you accept the other sub-facts of the perfect order. One of which, the first one is the way of life, the Sanadana system, the graded social order. Everyone should do the work which is assigned to them by the scripture.
Right.
So this is what they try to project.
Sir, I wanted to bring your attention to the initial comments that you made.
Okay.
Right at the beginning of the show itself, you said that the first Indian history was written in 1870.
Yes.
And then later, in collaboration with Max Miller, learning Sanskrit from the local Aryan Brahmins, and who at that time equated themselves as the cousins of these Indo-German, or they equated themselves with people who came from outside with white skinned color, and they called themselves the cousins of those white skinned people. And during those days it served their purpose, so they were happy with that kind of collaboration. But now, through the calendars and through some other Hindutva ideological education systems, which is these days is called as Indian knowledge system, they are claiming that these Westerners, they came and distorted and disturbed or completely eradicated our education system, and they have imposed their education system. So at one place they praise Max Muller, at one place they use Vivekananda to call the Indian knowledge system as superior. We want our Indian knowledge system to be superior. Of course, we are all Indians, we have no doubt about it, but not at the cost of telling lies, is what you said in the beginning itself. So I just wanted your attention and help me understand, how does this fit Either you call the Westerners as complete demolishers of our education system and borrow nothing from them, or you learn from them and be part of the global family.
No, one thing, it is a political trick for any ruler to demonize the preceding ruler.
Okay.
Modi will demonize Nehru so that he can project himself as the real hero. Demonization had been taking place in history writing for many years. They accused the colonial regime for the loss of our knowledge system. The British were the first people. The colonies were created. In fact, to be truly speaking, India was not made a true colony. Colony virtually means bringing people from their land and making this land a land of the immigrants. America was a colony of the Europe.
Right.
Australia was a colony of the England, where there was a population change. But in India, it was not exactly a colony. It was some sort of quasi-colony where the Indian resources were exploited. But many Europeans did not reach here to stay here forever. Only a few hundreds of Europeans came here. They could win because we were divided at that time. They conquered only divided India. Undivided India. Who divided India prior to that? Our own people, they quarreled with each other. Any empire was disintegrated by the rebels, and rebels are glorified by the local interest. And the rebels then are, they are experiencing the same fate. There were rebels who revolted there, the rebels' authority. So this, what you call balkanization of India was taking place for many years, because this balkanization benefited only one segment, that was the priesthood. In early days, to engage in a war, one king must perform yajnas. Before war, during war, after the war. Very expensive rituals. And the entire revenue went to appease this priesthood. And the balkanization benefits that when the number of kingdoms increase, number of priesthood increases.
Yeah. And the revenue also gets distributed.
Distributed. But the real people suffer. Why they should fight, they do not know. Because the Rajabhakti, devotion to king, insisted that they should fight and sacrifice their life. And Deshabhakti also similarly insisted now that they should fight, they should quarrel, they should lose their life, not for their promotion. These masters are sacrificed for the sake of few classes. These have been happening. And it is claimed that the Europeans had usurped many of our knowledge systems. There cannot be more absurdity than this. Here, the Europeans were the first people to introduce printing, print media in India. They printed even the Vedic literature. The East India Company's revenues were spent only to print the Sanskrit literature. Lord Macaulay later complained that they spent lakhs of rupees in printing the Vedas. There was nobody to buy even a single copy of the Vedas. Then why should the state squander their revenues on this printing of Vedas? So what Macaulay did was that until then, what was education? Writing the Vedic hymns was the education. The mantras, yantras, these were the education. So the Pathashala, Sanskrit Pathasalas were meant only for the priestly class. And the government's revenue was spent only on that. After the Macaulayan system, public schools were introduced for the first time. And they stopped paying large grants to the madrasas and the Pathasalas. Instead, Macaulay made it very clear that government revenue could be spent only on public education, secular education. So modern science, technology, modern social sciences, economics, philosophy, everything were introduced during the Macaulayan system. Does it mean that he destroyed the earlier education system. Was there anyone for the people? The people were not allowed to enter into education. The people were not allowed to enter into the temples where the education was imparted. So it is because they lost their monopoly. Because they lost the ground to claim that they knew everything. Vedas had everything in it. That is, humbug, the indulgent. Vedas does not have everything in it.
So that's
Vedas are hymns.
So that is their problem, because they lost their hegemony or monopoly or control over these education systems. They are claiming it to be the lost or distorted by the Westerners. And what about your, give me a little bit of more information or your opinion. Probably this might be my last question before I call this a day. People like Bishop Robert Caldwell or G.U. Pope in Tamil Nadu, their contributions towards the local literature and education and etc. etc. You definitely mentioned about Macaulay, but what about these people? Because we tend to hear from the books that our Hindutva friends write that these are the people that aim at distorting our education system. These are the people that made our education system crawl, disappear completely by introducing, praising some of the Tamilian literature. They favored one set of group and completely eradicated Aryan education system is what the books are claiming.
First thing, one thing I want to make it very clear that was there any regular scheme of public education prior to the colonial period? There was none.
Okay.
Some village assemblies had imparted primary education to some people. When you talk about higher education, only Vedic learning was considered as higher education, which was deprived to the other groups, masses. And then, when the Europeans were indulging in linguistic studies, their first attention was only to Sanskrit. Who assisted them? Who showed them way how to know more? Who provided them with the manuscripts? Only this, the same
Right.
whose successors are now called as Hindutva people.
Right.
So these people were there. H.S. Wilson was a supporter of the Sanskrit studies. James Prinsep was a supporter of the Sanskrit studies, Sanskrit schools. So there were Europeans who were supporting their claims too, because the foreigners were usually reluctant to disturb the local conditions. Then the local condition was that the deprivation of the small masses, the Panjamas, Sudras, from office and from education. This was the system there. And now the Hindutva people call whoever disputed or whoever came with information that challenged the monopoly stand of Sanskrit and Brahmins. They are called Christian conspirators or the Western conspirators. So the conspiracy theory is floated by the Brahmins now, Hindutva forces. Conspiracy theory, it is a conspiracy. If it is a conspiracy that benefited the Sudras and Panjamas, 85% of the population. If that conspiracy was not enacted by Macaulay and others, the masses would have been in the bottom of the social order, would not have the opportunity to go for regular education, would not aspire for government jobs and for high positions. So this conspiracy of Macaulay is appreciable. People who belong to the oppressed group will welcome this conspiracy. Then they say that the Caldwell and others were treated as traitors or conspirators, because they disputed the argument that every language emanated from Sanskrit in India. Sanskrit is the mother of all languages. As I told you, the very description of Sanskrit is very doubtful, because Samskriti means a refined, reformed one, an improved one. does it not indicate that there was an unimproved version earlier? So what was the language prior to it? Sanskrit was never a popular language in India.
Not even today. Not even today.
Not even in the past. We are the earliest empire, Nandan Empire. Then the succeeding empire, Mauryan Empire. Then the southern empire, Sadavahana Empire. Tamil kingdoms. We all know that they never used Sanskrit. So Sanskrit was only a later language developed from an ancient language which they themselves call Prakriti. Prakriti means natural, the one which was already existing. The Prakriti was, this Sanskrit was developed from Prakriti. So this Prakriti language, Pali, Arthamagadhi, so many languages were there. These were spoken by the people and the rulers at that time. So Buddha did not use Sanskrit because it was not popular language. Mahavira did not use Sanskrit because it was not popular language. Because Buddha always condemned elitism in social activities. The elitism is exploitative according to Buddha. So you should converse with people only with the knowledge which is legible to them. So Sanskrit was never a popular language. And even during the Guptan age, Sanskrit was made official language. And the inscriptions were made in the Sanskrit. But how many people were able to read them? How many people were instructed by it? Because you know very well that people were ignorant of Sanskrit. They want people to be ignorant of Sanskrit, that they would not see what is meant in the Sanskrit writings. Because Shruti was deliberately made. They do not want people to know it. Only unknown things would be given, contributed, attributed with the divinity. If known, it is known. What is the content of Vedas? If the people were able to read and learn about Vedas, they will not accept the sacred literature. They will know it is the work of the priesthood. So they do not want the people to know the real content of the literature. That is why they keep it for themselves. They refused it to others. So that's Sanskrit. But here, this the author, Sanskrit is the mother. So many Puranas and so many stories were floated with the Brahmins. They claimed even Tamil was created by a person from the north, Agastya. Agastya, who gave the first grammar to Tamil, the non-existent grammar. Agastya is mentioned only in the 8th century literature. There was no
8th century AD?
8th AD.
Oh, okay. That's pretty new.
Through a story, they floated this. And he went to Pudiyil Hills, the Tirunelveli region, Pudiyil Hills, for a divine purpose. Lord Shiva's wedding was taking place. Very costly wedding, so like our BJP leaders' wedding events. Very costly, so many people assembled there. So Kailash began to, it has submerged. So to retain the balance, Agastya was sent to the Pudiyil Hills. So when he reached there, the balance was restored. The people who wrote the Puranas did not know that the world is spherical. And they stated that this Agastya now evolved the grammar, first grammar of Tamil. And whose disciple was Tolkappiyar, whose grammar work is now available. But Tolkappiyar's work never mentions Agastya. There are not even a single reference to Agastya. So they made false claims. Similarly, when you go to Kerala, they will find that it was Parasurama who created Kerala. So everywhere they try to establish their authority over other people. But Caldwell, prior to that, Ellis, the Madras, official Ellis, who for the first time understood that the South Indian languages come under a single linguistic family. How he came to know it? Because there was a school of linguistic studies in St. George Fort. To make the company's officials know the languages of the local people. At that time, Madras presidency had 4 linguistic regions. Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam.
Yes.
So they had to go through the 4 linguistic regions. Then they found that there were similarities in between the 4 languages. The first person to establish that the South Indian languages belong to non-Sanskrit group was Ellis. And this was developed into research thesis by Caldwell.
Hmm.
So if you claim that Tamil had its own origin or Telugu had its own origin, then you are a traitor. And you believed the Westerners. The Westerners, did not destroy it. They revealed the fact through linguistic study, philological studies, that these languages come under a similar thing. They could thrive without Sanskrit.
Right.
And the basic words were entirely different from the Sanskrit group of languages. So that was established. When they were able to establish it, they now say that it was out of their conspiracy, divide and rule.
Right.
And Marshall, when he discovered the excavations, conducted excavations, found that pre-Aryan urban civilizations were existing in those regions. He became a conspirator. It was a conspiracy. So whatever was challenging the monopolistic claims of the Brahmins, those things will be treated as conspiracies.
Traitors and conspiracies, yeah.
If we believe that, we are a traitor. If we accept that view, we become a traitor. But if any foreigner says that the Brahmins were the makers of the entire civilization, like David Frawley, who is in America, then they become the real scholar. Michel Danino of France, who was a pattern of Sanskrit knowledge, and he is a great scholar. If you agree with the Sanskrit superiority, you are a patriot. If you don't agree with the Sanskrit superiority, Brahminical superiority, you become a traitor. This is the attitude. India as a multiple cultures country, where we people, there is a need to live together, we understand. We will live together, but on the basis of equality, on the basis of equal dignity. All these Hindutva claims make, question our dignity in a, a society, united society. India can be strong only when this diversity is respected and harmony is established. India will weaken, it will be split into groups. If this uniformity is insisted a condition for unity, the Hindutva forces want us to accept uniformity as a precondition for unity. Real and knowledgeable people, real patriotism means love of the people, not merely land, love of the people too. The real patriots. Real patriots would not accept anything that would deprive the people of their dignity.
Right.
So that is the challenge.
Right. So one last question, and I know we ran out of the time, but one last question, sir. From the Shankaracharya, the Adi Shankaracharya, who is from Kerala, he calls himself as the Dravida Putra, though he is venerated as an Arya, and he is a Brahmin, and he is the guru of mathas, etc., etc. But he calls himself as the Dravida Putra. So does it indicate, in their opinion, that Dravida is simply means the south, or simply means a region, not a separate race?
Dravida has different dimensions. The non-Aryan culture, civilization that existed in India and beyond India, they could be brought under the category Dravidian civilization. Dravida is something like Aryan, and the Sanskrit is a language, Tamil is a language. So here Dravida, we did not invent the word Dravida for a mischievous hidden agenda purpose.
Okay.
Dravida was used for the first time in inscription we find in Karavela's Adhigumba inscription.
Okay.
Where it refers to Dramila Sangadam, a Dravidian confederacy, which was there for 113 years. And that confederacy was broken by Karavela of Kalinga. So that inscription belongs to 169 BC. So as early as 2nd century BC, Dravida was known to them, known to the people. And here in the Skanda Purana, again in Sanskrit, there are reference to Panja Dravida, the Brahmins who were living in 5 Dravidian territories. So all the non-Aryans were known as Dravidas, Panja Dravidas.
Okay.
So that included Marathi region, that included Gujarati region, Andhra region, Tamil region too. So Dravida was a known term to identify non-Aryan,
So
non-Brahmin.
anything outside of that Aryavarta is Dravida.
Aryavarta never included South India.
Right.
The European these, visitors to India in the 1st century AD, even before that, the Pliny, Livy and other people,
Right.
even that book, Periplus, they refer to the South Indian region as Damarike, not as Indicate. Damarike.
Right.
So they had a different identity.
Hmm.
So this Shankaracharya is a very important character in Indian cultural social history.
Right.
He belonged to the 8th century AD.
Hmm.
He did not call himself Dravida Shishu. That is how the Brahmins today claim. He referred to Thiruñana Sambandar, one of the Saivite Nayanmar, as Dravida Shishu, Dravida child. That means he was a non-Aryan, non-Brahmin. Dravida Shishu. So then, Dravidian group of languages. This was, this theory was formulated only in the 19th century. So Dravida means severally a different culture and a different linguistic group and different faith system, but in any way it means non-Aryan, non-Brahmin.
Non-Aryan, non-Brahmin. So basically the discussion that we had today simply proves that the IIT Kharagpur and the agenda behind the calendar that they have produced to showcase as if there is the Aryan settlement or invasion or two separate linguistic and cultural groups that exist in India, one as Dravida and the other as Arya, is a myth, is what they are saying. But
because it is inconvenient to them.
Right, because it is inconvenient to them, as you obviously and rightly put forth. Thank you very much, sir, Professor Karunanandan Garu. Thank you very much for giving us some time and explaining in detail. It is, I know it takes a lot of information that you have, and you have to condense it within the time that we have, but still communicate the punch inside that information to all the audiences. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure and honor working with you, sir, for this 1 hour, and we hopefully have a few more sessions if your time permits, so that our audience can get benefit out of it.
Thank you, thank you. It is a pleasure to share my views with people like you and your audience.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
you very much, sir. And that is eye opener for today, and we will meet you with yet another episode. As you can see that the Hindutva ideology is being pushed in the form of education, in the form of calendar, in the form of TV serials, in the form of short movies, in the form of big screen movies, whatnot. All mediums are used to propagate this knowledge, this agenda.
Our only purpose is that we are against exploitation, domination.
Right.
If anything is projected by any means to justify and sustain and promote exploitation, we will have to counter it with facts.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. As being a true citizen of India, it is our duty to counter and give actual facts to people, what is true and what is not. So thank you very much for watching this show. We'll meet you once again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure.